Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another Eidolon hunting video. Today's video is going to be going over how you can manage your lures. I went over a few tips for managing lures in my Trinity video, but I did leave out a couple of tricks you can do that will improve your Eidolon hunt. So this video will just go over those tricks and hopefully help you manage your lures better. So starting out, there are two main roles for lures. First, the person who grabs the first lure and charges it, and second, the person who grabs the rest of the lures and brings them to the fight. Typically the second person is going to be your Trinity player, and it's what you're watching me do in the background right now. I went over this route more in depth in my Trinity video, so if you want to know more, I suggest checking that out. But basically, all you need to do is grab 7 lures here and bring them back to the fight. I'll leave an image link in the description with my route, as well as showing where the rest of the lures spawn. Because this route won't always be the most optimal route depending on where the Eidolon is. But grabbing the first lure is a little different. Whoever's grabbing it should really be the host, and that's because they're going to be able to load in first and grab that lure quickly. So if you are the host, and you're grabbing the first lure, you want to throw down an Arcwing, and then quickly zip over to the lake on the left of the doors. There's always going to be a lure at that lake. Grab that lure, and then as fast as you can, bring it back to the doors. The reason we're bringing this lure back to the doors is to manipulate the enemy spawns to ensure we get Vombalists, or at the very least give a high chance for them to spawn where we want them to. I'm not the person who came up with this technique, so I really don't know exactly how this works, but I do know that it works the majority of the time. And I'm pretty sure it just has to do with how the game decides where to spawn enemies depending on where you're located. So if you're doing the hunt and you're having a hard time finding those first Vombalists, this is a really good way to get them. And to ensure they spawn where we want them, you want your entire team to wait at the door as well, until you're able to bring the lure back there. If you or your team leave the starting area during this time, it'll affect where the enemies spawn, and we won't be able to predict where Vombalists are going to be. But again, like I said, I'm not an expert on this. If anybody does know exactly how this works, please leave a comment below, and I'll pin it to the top just in case people want to know how this works exactly. But basically, once you brought the lure back to the doors, you and your team are good to go for the hunt. And you may notice that while I was grabbing the first lure, I also marked where the Eidolon spawned. Since you're the first person in, it's typically easier for you to do this. Now if you've done everything correctly, you'll find the first few Vombalists over by the lake near the shrine. Having an aura on one of your teammates, like enemy radar, really helps here because you'll be able to see where the Vombalists are through the minimap, since some of the ground effects can look like Vombalists or they can hide in bushes. Typically for me, once I've found at least 2 Vombalists, I'll head back to the Eidolon, since usually you'll get at least one before the first shield gets taken down. But this is really up to you and your group, depending on how quickly you're taking that first shield down, because you don't want to be sitting around waiting for the Vombalists to come. The longer you wait, the more time you lose during the hunt, and the more time you lose, the less hunts you can do. And speaking of saving time, there are a couple cool little tricks you can do to make your group go faster. The first and probably most important trick is making sure you have an additional lure charged before the Terrorist goes down. Since the second player is grabbing 7 additional lures, it can be hard to get 3 Vombalist charges into one of them, ensuring you can capture the Terrorist. Because of this, it's often a good idea to hold some of those lures to the outside of the Terrorist, allowing them to damage the Vombalists as they come in. While the Vombalists are in their physical form, you'll often see a small chain of energy going from the Vombalist to the lure, and that indicates that the lure is slowly damaging the Vombalist, which can eventually result in the Vombalist shredding its physical form and getting absorbed by the lure. By holding the lures on the outside of the fight, this becomes much more likely, especially after you've killed all the Synovas and the Eidolon calls Vombalist to it to heal itself. Once you have the second lure charged, make sure both the first and second lures are in range and the Eidolon is captured. It's at this point that the second trick comes into play. After you've dealt the killing blow and captured the Eidolon, the lures will no longer detach, no matter how far away they are. This means you can quote-unquote pull the lures to any location you want, meaning that you can pull them directly to the shrine, allowing you and your team to immediately grab the shard in the arcane and place it in the shrine spawning the next Eidolon. If you are doing this, however, you need to be certain that the Eidolon has been captured, because if you're wrong and the lure gets pulled too soon, you're going to lose the capture and be unable to complete the hunt. And that's going to be really awkward for you and your team. But you should know it's safe to pull when you hear a little ding. I'll let you guys decide if I have a future career in video game sound effects. Once you hear that, you should be safe. But, pay attention to how bad your ping is, and do your best to make sure you're not messing the hunt up. And if you're using this technique in a pug, you might really confuse one of the players, which will end up costing you time instead of saving it. This is also a good time to talk about paying attention to where your lures are while your team's trying to kill the Eidolon, because you don't want your lures sitting in front of the DPS as they're trying to shoot the Synovas or the Eidolon itself. If you guys have done a hunt before, I'm sure you know how annoying it is to have a lure block one of your shots, so just do your best to avoid it. And it's also good to know that the first lure to attach is going to be the one to break into the shards and arcane. So here my Volt player was the one who attached the first lure, meaning that he's the one who needed to pull the lure to the next location. You can get around this by dropping your lure and then giving it to the Trinity player if you want to, but for this example we didn't. And you can also do this at the very end for the Hydralisk capture and drag the lures to the gate, making it faster for you and your squad to leave and re-enter the mission. But that's all I got for today, guys. Hopefully this video helps people manage their lures a little bit better. And again, just as a reminder, be careful when pulling lures to different locations. If you did find the video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like, and subscribe for future content.